This story comes from someone who ended up slapping her brother-in-law, who had asked her parents for a loan, and pushing her mother-in-law in front of her in-laws. It appears there are some insane people out there who believe if their in-laws have money, they should share it with them. Let's take a look together. Please subscribe and like our channel.
Hello, I'm a woman in my mid-30s, who has been married for 2 years and doesn't have any children yet. Recently, I ended up pushing my mother-in-law away, as she was trying to slap my face in front of my in-laws. My husband then went to his parents' house and caused a scene. I'm not sure if I'm in the wrong here, so I'd appreciate your advice. We got married after a long period of dating. There were some tense moments with my mother-in-law during the wedding preparations, but I thought she would come to like us as we build our life together post-wedding. I always believed my husband would be on my side, and that would be enough, but reality has proven otherwise. My parents are quite well off, so they provided us with our newly home and all the wedding gifts. We did this because my husband's family was struggling financially. My parents agreed to this generously, saying it's customary for the side that can afford it to shoulder these costs. The house is under my name, and the tax on the gift was not small. The house price has increased significantly over the past 2 years. We've both been working up until recently, when I started taking a break from work. We've been giving both sets of parents a monthly allowance of 200,000 won. Our parents said they would only accept this allowance until we have a baby. But my in-laws keep asking for an increase. My mother-in-law doesn't ask my husband for this, she always asks me. My husband and I got along very well when we were dating. I admired his considerate personality and thoughtfulness, which led to our decision to get married. As I mentioned earlier, my in-laws are not well off. My father-in-law worked for the same company for over 25 years before retiring. Since then, he seems to have spent the money he saved while working inconsistently. My father-in-law seems to be unable to move on from his youthful days at his old company. He often boasts about how the company wouldn't have survived without him, and how influential he was. My mother-in-law takes pride in having raised her children well through her housekeeping. Despite being in her mid-50s, she's among many women of her generation who graduated from college and had successful careers. My father-in-law used his severance pay to start a business with my mother-in-law, but it didn't go well, and they lost a lot of money. My mother-in-law also lost quite a bit of money investing in stocks, yet she's incredibly proud of her knowledge in stocks. My parents also have a fair amount of pride in themselves, but they don't express it much. They provided a house and wedding gifts for their daughter's wedding, showing their financial capabilities, but they don't boast about it. On the other hand, my in-laws, who had their son's wedding provided for by their daughter-in-law, boast a lot about themselves. My husband is also not very fond of his parents' behavior. After getting married, we visited my husband's parents about once a month. They complained that we didn't visit often, but my husband defended our decision. During holidays, we did everything required at my husband's parents' house. My mother-in-law belittled me for doing these tasks, but I ignored her. We celebrated birthdays, Parents' Day, and various anniversaries, never missing a single event. Even on my brother-in-law's birthday, we never forgot to send a small gift. My parents remodeled my grandfather's old countryside house into a vacation home near the beach. My father often invited his business clients to this house for entertaining. He would invite their families as well, and they would go fishing during the day and have barbecues in the evening. Before marriage, I often went to this vacation home with my friends for overnight trips. My husband and I also visited the place during our dating period. After marriage, we invited my husband's family to the holiday home a few times. We invited them without any ulterior motives. But they seemed to have strange expectations. One day, my brother-in-law suddenly asked for a loan of 20 million won. It was a lot of money. And we didn't know where we could get that amount immediately. While my husband and I were living comfortably without children, and both of us working, we didn't have the means to lend such a large amount instantly. When we said we couldn't afford it, my brother-in-law said, "You can just ask your parents to lend it." I was taken aback by his presumption that my parents would just have that kind of money lying around. Even if my parents were well off, it's not right for my brother-in-law to make such a comment, right? I told my husband about this, and he called his brother to discuss it. But then my brother-in-law called me back and got angry. He accused me of making him look bad in front of his brother. And I was dumbfounded. He must have said something to my mother-in-law, because she also started accusing me. She said the amount wasn't that big and blamed me for causing trouble in the family, because I couldn't lend it. If it wasn't a big deal, couldn't she have lent him the money? I couldn't understand why she was blaming me, when she was in the same situation of not being able to lend the money. Recently, I got another call from my brother-in-law asking for a loan. He and his wife both work and have a child. They probably can't save a lot, but they should be able to live while saving some money. So I couldn't understand why they needed money. When I asked him why he needed the money, he said it was impolite to ask, and told me just to say whether I could lend it or not. So I told him that I couldn't. I also told my husband about the conversation I had with his brother that day. I was worried about my brother-in-law, and suggested my husband call him, with no other intentions. But when my husband asked if something was wrong, my brother-in-law became angry. He said he asked for a loan because he needed it, and questioned why we needed to know why. My husband explained that we were just worried about him. But my brother-in-law got irritated, and they ended up arguing over the phone for a while before hanging up. Then, on the weekend, I was summoned to my in-laws' house. My husband had to work that Saturday, but my mother-in-law insisted I come over to help with some work. So, I went to my in-laws' house alone. My brother-in-law was there, but his wife and child were not. Turns out, there was no actual work to be done. As soon as I arrived, my mother-in-law became angry. She accused me of being cruel to family members, and of causing trouble in the family by tattling to my husband about what they said. I was confused and asked what I did wrong. She said that if my brother-in-law asked for a loan, I should have just given it to him and shouldn't have asked why he needed it. When I asked why I couldn't ask, she said it was impolite to ask such a question to an older person. I was so shocked that I couldn't say anything. My brother-in-law suggested asking my parents for the loan. And apparently, that was okay. But it wasn't okay for me to ask why he needed the money. My mother-in-law suddenly started yelling. I got so angry that I asked her if she was trying to invest in stocks again, and had told my brother-in-law to ask me for a loan. My mother-in-law was shouting so loudly that I couldn't understand what she was saying. My father-in-law didn't seem to want to stop her. My brother-in-law yelled at me, asking if I was ignoring him because he didn't have any money. My mother-in-law was shouting something incomprehensible. I was so confused and shocked that I didn't know what to do. He said if I didn't want to lend him the money, I should have just said so, instead of making unnecessary comments. So, I asked him, can't I even talk about such things with my spouse? My brother-in-law started cursing at me. He was yelling, in front of our parents, "You're being so rude," and started charging at me. I slapped him as hard as I could. He fell to the ground crying. My mother-in-law then charged at me, but I pushed her away and ran out of the house as if I was running away. As soon as I left the house, I texted my husband, and he immediately called me. I told my husband about what happened and said that I was too shaken to go home, so I would go to my parents' house. My husband immediately left work and came to my parents' house. My parents scolded me, asking what had happened and why I had hit my brother-in-law in front of my in-laws. My husband left to take me home and said he would go to his parents' house. He came back after a while. When he asked his mother what was wrong with refusing to lend my brother-in-law money, she went off, saying that we could afford it, and why couldn't we lend even that much to family? When my husband said he was going to his parents' house, his mother called my brother-in-law back, so he came back to their house after a while. My husband asked my brother-in-law if our money is his money. Surprisingly, my brother-in-law said that those who have money should be able to lend it, and that people with money are stingy. My husband said it was pointless to argue and told him not to contact us again. As my husband was leaving, his mother complained that she was being ignored by her son and started crying. As my husband was about to leave, my brother-in-law threatened to report me to the police for hitting him. So my husband took a video with his phone and told him to do as he pleased. He said he took the video because he didn't know what his mother and brother would do, and wanted to keep the evidence. I'm sure my brother-in-law will report to the police. He'll probably claim that I hit him severely. My husband told me not to worry, and that if necessary, I could also claim that I was hit by my mother-in-law and brother-in-law. He also mentioned that since my brother-in-law admitted during a call with him that I only slapped him once, we could submit the call as evidence if he exaggerates the incident in the police report. Talking with my husband, I suspect that my mother-in-law told my brother-in-law to ask me for a loan. She probably wanted to use the money for stock investments. It's unbelievable. Who else would ask for money from their in-laws to invest in stocks? I'm considering cutting off the money we've been sending to my in-laws.
There's no end to the absurdity. Now there are those who covet their in-laws' money. The notion that someone with money should share it because their situation is bad. I wonder what kind of twisted logic that is in any country.